welcome back to my channel. As promised, this is part 2 of that Babe Ruth documentary that I have started watching and that I've been taking a look into and just finding out so much and how diversified he was in reference to like outfield, and he also could pitch and he can bat and he can offense, deep, whatever the case may be. He was all around, and he was more than just, you know, Babe Ruth on the field. He just became this very popular name. And where we left off at, we were talking about the Yankees and how he went there and he turned them into a championship team. And the Yankee Stadium was built based off of like his popularity. Like, who can say my popularity was the reason why they built a stadium? Like, really? So we're just going to go ahead and jump right back into that section and just continue on this video. So you guys, of course, come with me while we finish learning about Babe Ruth. All right. Here we go, guys.
All those fans who wanted a glimpse of the Babe.
You know, if you look at any culture and you say, one of the biggest buildings that have been built by that culture, you know, they haven't been cathedrals and stuff. They've been all these arenas and ballparks and things like that. And if you say, who's the patron saint of it all, it's Babe Ruth. Yankee Stadium, you know, way back then was built mainly because of him.
I don't think there's ever been an athlete in any sport who has been so revolutionary in the sense of attracting so many people.
Ruth had drawing power. Ruth was a star.
Yankee Stadium was always referred to as the house that Ruth built. They built it because the stadium they were playing in, borrowed or rented stadium that the New York Giants played in, was just not large enough to hold all the fans that Babe Ruth was bringing along.
I mean, that's just crazy. You're that popular. You're that much of like a force, a magnet, that your personality, who you are, what you do, just draws that many people in. You know, topped off what could fit as far as fans in that stadium. So many people wanted to see, so many people wanted to witness it, that you needed a bigger stadium because that's just how popular you were. Man, that just speaks volumes on so many levels.
Built the stadium in 1923. Babe Ruth hits the first home run in the stadium. The Yankees win the World Series that year against the Giants. That's the point where he takes over the baseball world completely.
Babe Ruth had become King of New York. He was America's first ever real sporting celebrity.
He was just, at that time, the biggest star in American life, and really the template for the American culture of celebrity. He is quite likely the most photographed individual in American history. Marilyn Monroe, perhaps, or Elvis Presley, but at least as big as those people, if not bigger, in American culture.
But here was an accessible star. Generous, humorous, and down-to-earth. And this everyman personality allowed Americans to identify with the Babe.
He looked like someone you could chat with on the street corner, and in fact you could. He never lost that common touch, even at the heights of his fame. And one day he'd be speaking to the President of the United States, rather informally, I might add. But one day he looked at the President and he said, "Hot as hell, ain't it, Prez?" And the next day,
I just love that. You just hear how he's interacting with people. He's interacting with the President of the United States as if they're one and the same, and not that he's better than anyone over here, anything like that. He was just unapologetically him, and that he just was a real guy. Like, you have to like take note of that. And when someone has, like he said, notably one of the most famous people out, you know, or you know, one of the top 3 or top 5 when it comes to the most photographed or autographed, like, he kept himself very down to earth, and that you just gotta love that. Like, I'm loving hearing that, because not too many people would do that. Look how he just spoke to the President. Like, oh my goodness.
To you or me on the street corner, and just the same demeanor. What you saw was what you got.
Talking to the fans, being around the fans was second nature to him. It wasn't a pressure. It was never a pressure. With his fans, when he was doing something, he didn't do it exclusively. He'd say, "Hey, come on, I'm going on a ride, come with me."
What?
And he'd bring you with him, that's why. He was beloved.
A lover of life.
He wasn't
and of people.
Exclusive, he was always inclusive.
As Ruth became a household name, the US was experiencing a time of economic boom, and the world's biggest baseball star would personify the roaring 20s.
hit his stride as a baseball player in 1919, just as the Roaring Twenties or the Jazz Age were taking off, and he was made for that.
He just had this huge personality. He had an appetite for life.
He ate large, he drank large, he
just looked like he had
large.
fun.
He did everything large.
You know, all the men wanted to be him, all the women wanted to sleep with him. Yeah, the funny thing about Ruth is that the real person and the myth is sort of coincided. That was Babe Ruth.
Well, they didn't call it the Roaring Twenties for nothing, and Babe was sat himself right in the middle of it. Yeah, it was, flappers, and he did have girls galore. Babe was accepted in every speakeasy in New York.
A people person, a ladies' man.
The kingpins,
enjoyed
and the not so kingpins, and he didn't discriminate. Babe knew everybody. Everybody wanted to know Babe. You know, if Babe came over and said, "How you doing, kid?" You made it. That's all I had to say. How you doing,
You
kid?
made it.
And it was like everybody would walk on water. My mother said it was amazing.
Wow. That's a lot to say about a person, to describe the personality.
But the fast living off the pitch was affecting Ruth's game. Overweight and blighted by injury, in 1925 he suffered his worst season, with just 25 home runs from 98 games.
Man.
He looked like he really let himself go, and that his bad living was going to get to him. And he spotted that, and he went out and got a personal trainer.
What?
The first thing.
Babe bowed down.
Check that out. I have to pause. I have to hit the brakes. Like, first of all, great work ethic. Amazing work ethic. How many can just sit here and say they can catch themselves in the midst of it all and see and really critique themselves and say, man, I'm having a bad season. I need to do something about it. Let me do something now. Like, he's seen it, he caught it, and just out of that, like, amazing work ethic. He took it beyond that because he wanted to continue to be who he was. And just a lot of firsts for him when it comes to that. Like, the first offensive way to play like that came from Babe. And now the first person to, he's jumping out to get into personal trainer. Like, he's getting a trainer now to do something about him and to change who he is so that he can become better. I doubt that's something that a lot of people did back then. Personal trainers now are like common, but back then he went and jumped into getting better at himself so that he can deliver the Babe Ruth that everyone wanted.
He would change. And change he did. He never did that again. He never did. He never thought of himself bigger than the game or bigger than his fans.
The vigorous training regime paid off. 47 home runs followed in 1926.
Hey, that's good.
And the Yankees were back in a World Series final. It was his love of baseball that maintained his position at the top.
Most people think that he just played for the Yankees and then was a degenerate the rest of the time. But he wasn't a degenerate the rest of the time. As soon as the season ended, he was off on these barnstorming tours. Babe Ruth probably
lived life
played
too.
Baseball against a larger percent of the population than any baseball player who's come since.
What?
By 1927, Babe was at his best. He slugged the Yankees towards another World Series crown with 60 home runs, a season record that would last for 34 years.
What? A record for 30-something years?
His peak was probably 1927, the year that he hit 60 homers.
Crazy.
The 1927 Yankees are considered by many historians to be the best baseball team of all time.
Best team of all time because of him.
The Yankees won another World Series in
He was just so far ahead of his time as far as talent. Like 30-something years, that record stayed there and held by Babe. And that was considered one of the best teams or the best season and year of all time. Like, what the heck?
in 28. But within a year, America and the rest of the world entered a period of economic crisis. Even in those times of depression, though, Ruth remained an inspirational figure.
Good times or bad time, everyone
Despite
needs a
being
hero
the
or
game's
someone to look
biggest
up to.
earner, few begrudged him that status. He was still Babe Ruth, man of the people.
Man of the
When
people.
he earned $80,000, which was a record amount, someone said to him, "Babe, you know, you're earning more money than President Hoover." And he said, "Well, I had a better year than him." I mean, that was so typical of Babe Ruth humor.
What's important to know about him in that era is that he was a tremendous symbol of hope for Americans, in part because he continued to do things that nobody had ever done on a baseball field before, and in part because he made a lot of money during that time, and a lot of people weren't making a lot of money. So he was sort of a symbol of normalcy. The idea that we would hope to return
to get back to that.
And you know, if Babe Ruth was still all right, maybe we would all still be all right.
That is amazing.
Although now
that is absolutely amazing to me. Like with all these records that Babe Ruth has, all these accomplishments, his talent, his championships, everything that he has done so far, and to be able to stay so grounded, and not only just that you know accomplished all these things, you have the world literally like watching you, depending on you, using you as like looking up to you. You're that example for them. You're that hope for them. Like, and you managed to stay just so grounded. And I think like he did better than anyone. Like when it comes to that that comes to like having to deal with that type of pressure. But at the same time, he didn't think he was better than anyone. You know, through the examples that we've been hearing and watching him do, like he never thought he was better than anyone. And I think that makes him even better to not only have stayed grounded throughout all of that, not only to just be that representation for people. He never thought he was better than anyone, no matter how much money he made, no matter how much the world loved Babe Ruth. He was just that. He was the next person standing next to you. He was just like them in his mind, and I love that. And then eventually I'll get my words together here.
Twilight of his career, Ruth enjoyed one final triumph in the 1932 World Series against the Chicago Cubs. In Game 3, after 2 strikes, Ruth allegedly pointed to where he was going to hit the next pitch.
What?
He smashed the ball out of the ground. It became known as the called shot. The Yankees went on to win, but the debate about that home run still rages.
Did he really call that shot in the championship? Like, that's epic.
He did it many, many times.
That's epic. I want to hear it.
Did he point? Yes, he pointed. Because he did it many, many times. He'd say, hey, Jack, what side of the scoreboard did so-and-so hit it? Oh, you hit it to the right, babe. Okay, now I'm going to hit it to the left. And he'd go out and hit it to the left. He knew the ball. He knew what he could do with it.
It's a Ruthian thing to do, to predict that you're going to hit a home run.
A Ruthian thing to do.
Pitch. And it doesn't matter really whether he did it or not. What matters is we either think he did it or we want to believe that he did it.
That home run would be his final hit in a World Series. As the Depression worsened, so did Ruth's form. In February 1935, he was sold to the Boston Braves. And his 15-year love affair with New York and the Yankees had come to an end.
His career does sort of track with American history. Of course, he has, some very, very great success prior to the stock market crash in 1929, and then as the Depression worsens and deepens in the early 30s, 1932, 1933, Babe is starting to see the beginning of the end as a player.
He had a fabulous year in 1932, and yet he was pretty much out of baseball in 1935.
Fittingly, Ruth departed with 3 home runs in one of his final games for the Braves. Numbers 712, 713, and 714. Just a week later, in May 1935, he announced his retirement, longing of a return to his beloved Yankees as their manager.
That would be awesome.
And for whatever reason, Jacob Ruppert, the owner of the Yankees, didn't see the managerial stuff in Babe Ruth and didn't want to try to move him into that sort of a position.
That's
was an excellent child to be the manager of the Yankees. And so I think the personal relationship between the two of them probably is what stopped any chances he had.
After all he did for the Yankees.
He was to manage the Yankees, and he probably would have done a decent job. He would have matured. He wouldn't have been a 25-year-old anymore. He'd have been, 45 or 50. But the answer was, Babe, my boy, you can't manage yourself. Why would you think that we would hire you to manage our ball players? It made him bitter.
Wow.
After doing such great things for the Yankees and making Colonel Ruppert so much money, here he's being shunted aside. It made him rather bitter.
That's heartbreaking.
He was devastated. My mother said he never got over it. He used to sit by the radio and call the plays before they happened. She said he was so despondent. and depressed. Baseball's his life's blood. And here baseball was saying,
no.
Sorry,
And
we don't
shut
want
the
you
door
here.
on him.
Ruth struggled without baseball in his life. The game was all he'd known. But his star failed to fade. Despite no longer taking an active role in the game, he was idolized wherever he went.
That's good. At least
The
baseball
thing
still
that
loved
happens
him.
with athletes is that you have,
And he
you have
still
two
loved him.
deaths. You know, I mean, you have the death of your career, and then you have your own death. What do you do if you've been Babe Ruth? Where do you go? Or how do you recreate that excitement
Wow.
that you had when every day you went and 60,000 people cheered you and called your name?
That's true. That's
Just a
totally
decade
different.
after retiring, he became stricken with cancer and a shadow of the figure he once was.
Wow.
But even then, Babe Ruth was still giving all of himself to the American people. Right
Still.
until the very end.
What? Selfless.
There's been so many lovely things said about me, and I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to thank everybody.
Wow. Glad that I had the opportunity to thank everybody.
Like 20 minutes before he died, he signed an autograph for a male nurse. He said, you better get it now because you're not going to...
What? 20 minutes before he died, he's still doing stuff for the people. Oh my God, you gotta love this guy.
You're going to get it now.
The poignancy is there. I mean, getting sick and approaching death far too early, and yet still being Babe Ruth, being this incredible media personality and real personality in American culture. Even then, he still had it when he walked onto that field. It's just it gives you goosebumps to think about it.
Wow.
On August the
Truly
16th,
touching.
1948, Babe Ruth died, aged just 53. America mourned its greatest sporting hero.
People were very, very distraught. People loved him. I don't know of anyone who didn't love Babe Ruth.
What was there not to
It was
love
just,
about him?
if you like baseball, he was the icon. And then when he died,
Man, he gave all of him.
thousands of people showed up to honor him. I can't think of any person other than perhaps some beloved president or something who had that kind of following.
Wow.
Ruth's legacy
Who
can be
can
seen
say
across
that?
America today, more than a century after he picked up a baseball bat in Baltimore. His record of 714 career home runs stood for nearly 40 years. He led the league in home runs scored 11 times, and in runs scored 8 times. A pioneer, a record breaker, and an all-American hero. Babe Ruth lives on.
And still today,
All-American hero.
when young kids come into the Baseball Hall of Fame, one of their first questions is, where's the Babe Ruth stuff? He hasn't played a Major League Baseball game since 1935, and kids are walking in today wanting to know about him. So he's as big as it gets in baseball, and
Crazy.
for a long time was as big as it could get in America.
They're still asking to this day about him.
Certainly the rest of the
Still
people
living
from this
on.
generation have pretty well been forgotten. I don't hear anybody talking about Honus Wagner very much or Ty Cobb very much. I think Babe Ruth will always be with us.
It's probably oral tradition more than anything. Fathers tell their sons, and then sons grow up and tell their sons. It is kind of an amazing thing. You know, in taverns in the United States, and they'll be pictures.
Just look at him. Just look at this. What's happening right here? You see him, and you see him with the people, and you see him. He's eating with them. He's drinking with them. He's having a hot dog. Like, who? How can he not have still been remembered to this day? Like, oh my goodness! Like, kids. This is an amazing example of a man in reference to a sport, athlete, just period, person by far. Oh my gosh. I had no idea.
Babe Ruth, as often as there be pictures of any of today's athletes, I think. He just struck a chord in people, and that the way he lived and the way he looked, he just set the benchmark for success in athletics.
Just the way he carried himself, the way he interacted with people, the way he thought of himself, like, what an amazing thing. Wow. I can say that watching this was one of the best things that I have done in reference to getting to know an athlete from a sport, a legend, someone whose name will never be forgotten. He's still being mentioned to this day, and who knows how long that will continue to go on, hopefully forever. That's just, the story itself was touching. It went from just his success and how much he brought and gave. He gave every single last bit of him to the world of baseball and to the people, his fans, to everyone that encountered him. And that's just amazing. And then it kind of sucked. It definitely sucked. I know at the end when he could not manage the Yankees and baseball kind of sort of closed that door on him. And then, you know, from there, just his life just slowly, you know, he still never gave up giving to the world of baseball, although it had broke his heart by shutting the door in his face. And that's how you just see how selfless he was and how amazing he was as an individual. So I enjoyed learning about Babe Ruth, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, go and look at part 1. I hope you guys enjoyed all of it. I definitely did. Give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you guys haven't. Hit the bell. And make sure you follow me on Twitter and on my Instagram, guys. And I will see you guys next time.